Rotation has arrived in Disney Lorcana. It's the biggest news from yesterday, but there's tons of news to get through. Reprints, new rarities. We're going to discuss in today's video what it means for you as a player of Disney Lorcana and what it means for the wider community. What is going to happen with the markets, all that kind of thing. And speaking of markets, the channel sponsor is Card Market, the biggest market in Europe for Disney Lorcana. And it's going to be very fascinating later in the week, once this news is settled and once people know a little bit more about what's happening, how the markets will react to this news, because a lot of people are going to be selling their cards, that's for sure. And we'll definitely do a market watch later in the week. So what is rotation? Well, rotation is honestly, in my opinion, a terrible adjective to describe what is actually happening here, because rotation suggests that something comes in, it goes out, and then it comes back in. That is not the case. The first chapter, Rise of the Floodborn and Into the Inklings and Ursula's Return, are going to be rotated out of core constructed in Disney Lorcana, but there is almost no chance that they will ever be rotated back in. So I'm not really sure that rotation is the best adjective for this, but it is what's used in the industry. What rotation means is that there's now going to be two formats in Disney Lorcana competitive play. You're going to have core constructed, which is going to be your set champs, your Disney Lorcana challenges. That's going to be the main way to play competitive Lorcana, and that is going to be basically 8 sets at a time. You're going to have two years. So at the moment, we're in the first rotation of the first chapter to Reign of Jafar. That's the first 8. But then once Fabled comes out, those first 4 from the first chapter to Ursula's Return go out. And then once set 13 comes out, so that's going to, set 12 will be like another big bad. Let's say it's the Queen or Yzma. There'll be like a co-op mode for them. And then once that finishes, set 13 comes out and Shimmering Skies to Reign of Jafar will be rotated out. And you might get some more reprints in set 13. We don't know about that. What that means is Reign of Jafar then comes out in about 3 weeks, and 15 months later, it's going to be rotated out, which is not a lot of time at all, frankly, for a set to be in core constructed. That is a pretty big concern that I have. Like, that element is a little bit alarming. 15 months for a whole set. People are going to be sinking thousands of pounds, hundreds of pounds certainly, into buying product for this. And are we now going to see people buying less of Reign of Jafar as a result of the fact that it's not going to be in rotation for as long as a set like Shimmering Skies, right? Shimmering Skies is basically going to be in core constructed for 2 years, but Reign of Jafar for 9 months less. So that's an interesting dynamic, isn't it? The other interesting dynamic is that Fabled, which is going to be the 9th set and the first when the rotation kicks in, is going to be essentially a reprint set, which I'm also not sure how I feel about. Over half of Fabled, or around half, I believe it's slightly over half, of Fabled will be reprints. Let that sink in. Over half of Fabled will be reprints. From the first chapter, Rise of the Floodborn, Into the Inklings, Ursula's Return. So that means if you're someone like me that has already got close to a master set of those sets, it's going to be a lot less compelling for me to open boxes for Fabled, which is maybe why they've also timed this announcement with some new rarities for Disney Lorcana coming out with Fabled. There's one that's, we'll talk about it more, there's one that's in between Legendary and Enchanted called Epic, which is more rare than a Legendary, less rare than an Enchanted. And then you've got these iconic cards, which is going to be Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse, and they are probably going to be like 1 in, 500 packs or something like that. We don't have the exact pull rates. So Fabled's going to be a very interesting set. It's very, very heavy on reprints. What's getting reprinted, we don't know. We only know a few cards being reprinted. Tinkerbell. We know that the Honey Wizard is being reprinted with a new tag, by the way, which is interesting. Shows that they might be willing to change a few things on the reprints. Maybe, I mentioned earlier how in a digital card game, maybe I didn't mention that because I've recorded this video a few times, but in a digital card game, you can turn a few knobs on things that you can go back and buff cards. You can't do that in a game like Disney Lorcana on paper, but maybe you could with reprints. Like you could give a card a bit of a buff. I'm not so sure. Overall, I think that rotation is probably for the best. You might be asking, like, why would you do this? This just looks like a cash grab. Why do they not just print more cards and we get to play with everything? Well, in a paper card game like Disney Lorcana, there is the enemy of all game designers in a game like this is a phrase called power creep. And power creep, if you look at a card like Belle from the latest set, for example, the 3 cost, she's an example of a card that power creeped, right? Like, she power creeped Cinderella with the Fortisphere. You could banish the Fortisphere or Popsicle very easily, summon in Belle, and then you're suddenly singing like Storm and Strength in a more efficient way than you could do with Cinderella. That is kind of an example of power creep, right? You had Cinderella, who was very strong, and then 5 or 6 sets later, you have Belle, who is like Cinderella, but a little bit better. That is power creep, right? For example, you might have Lilo and Maleficent in set 1, who quest for 2 on turn 1 and cost 1 and 1/1 stat line. But then in Fabled, let's say, they release a card that has the same stats, but suddenly it has 2 willpower instead of 1. And just the exact same stats. That would also be an example of power creep. And then if you've got that, 8 sets later, suddenly it's got 2 strength as well. And then suddenly in the space of 16 sets, you've gone from a 1/1 card that quests for 2 on turn 1 to a 2/2 card that quests for 2 on turn 1. And that is an idea of power creep, right? Because then 10 sets down the line, it's going to creep up and up and up. And suddenly you've got a game which looks very different from the one that was originally balanced. Your original cards are totally and utterly useless in all formats, including this new Infinity Constructed format, which we'll talk about more. And power creep is really the great enemy for game designers. And why is power creep necessary if you don't rotate sets? Well, it's because you need to still release cards which are good. If you look at some of the early Reign of Jafar cards released, a lot of them look pretty terrible. And that's because we're coming to, towards the end of this rotation. They're not wanting to just print really good cards all the time to sell packs. They're wanting to sell put out enough good cards to sell packs without completely, totally decimating the design philosophy of Disney Lorcana and the game that is very delicately balanced. So rotation is a way of avoiding power creep because it means that there's just less cards available in the core constructed format, and therefore there's less competition for places, and it allows the designers to have more flexibility on what cards continue to be in the format as well, right? Like, for example, if you look at Rise of the Floodborn, I've mentioned before, there's a lot of cards in Rise of the Floodborn which are, in my opinion, overstated. Mr. Smee and Madam Mim's Fox are 2 cards which come to mind very strongly. I would be quite surprised if either of those cards got reprinted. It's possible that they might, but for me, those are 2 cards which, if they would just remain in the format indefinitely, are kind of an example of power creep and why power creep could be dangerous. Like, Smee and Fox were significantly stronger than anything we had in the first chapter, and if those cards are going to stay in the core constructed domain indefinitely, at some point Ravensburger is going to be forced to print cards better than Smee and better than Fox, and it can just get out of hand very, very quickly. So this gives also them an opportunity, rather than banning cards all the time, like Hiram got banned, that was, in a bit of an emergency situation. It allows them to rebalance the game and react to design, I'm not going to say design mistakes, but design decisions that they maybe regret somewhat. Like, I would imagine Smee, I think it's overtuned. Fox, I'd be surprised if they got reprinted. Of course, it's possible that they might down the line in the future, right? But I would be surprised, and I have no intel on this to be clear, if we see Smee and Fox in Fabled. But maybe if set 13 is like a reprint set, that's when you might see them like come back into the mix, for example, right? Or even like set 17. We don't know. We definitely don't know if set 13 is also just going to be a reprint set either. On the press conference that I was part of, I had some early access to early information. They were quite coy on that, and they actually made that quite clear that they're not necessarily just having a reprint set every year. So rotation, overall, I do think it's the right thing. I had some conversations last night with Zan Syed, Artabax, and Wonderland, who are 3 of the best Disney Lorcana players in the world and all have a long history of trading card games, and they were all pretty positive, and their kind of opinion was pretty supportive of Ravensburger, having trust that rotation was the right thing to do. One thing that Zan Syed pointed out as something he's worried about is how it might begin to split the community, because previously you would just have players that we all play the same format, we all play core constructed, but now moving forward you might have some people that love core constructed and others who love infinity constructed. frankly, the more I think about it, I'm really quite excited that I get to experiment with both. I think core constructed is certainly what I'm going to focus on, but particularly down the line when there is inevitably an online client for Disney Lorcana, I would imagine in like 2 to 3 years, that's going to be really fun that suddenly, there's not just like one ladder you can play on. You can play like the constructed ladder and you can play the infinity constructed ladder. Like more ways to play Disney Lorcana can only be a good thing. Can only be a good thing. And while I was initially incredibly skeptical about rotation and hated the sound of it, I am coming around to quite liking the idea of it, because when Fable comes out, it is going to be the highest impact set in terms of metagame difference that we've ever seen. Like if you really think about a lot of the metas, a lot of people have been a little bit critical that they feel very samey in the previous months, right? But now the rotation is in every 4 sets, it's going to feel very, very different, and it's going to be a big splash and a big change. The reprint aspect of it, I quite like. We're getting reprints as well, like cards like Tinkerbell. You would imagine like Rapunzel, I would be surprised if she gets rotated out. I don't know, maybe she will. She'll certainly come back at some point, right? Like she's not going to be gone forever. I think that we can all agree on that. But like it gives them an opportunity to get rid of maybe cards that are overtuned, like Smee, like Fox, maybe Strength of a Raging Fire, Storm, Cindy. Like what happens if these kinds of cards go? What happens if Ariel gets rotated out as well? It will be really, really fascinating to see. I don't like that the rotation was announced at this stage necessarily. I don't know, maybe I do. Like at first I was thinking like rotation, this probably should have been announced quite a long time ago before, but I think at least it's been announced before Reign of Jafar, and I do imagine that this was quite a tactical decision from Ravensburger not to announce it too quickly, because it's like I say, really, if you think about Reign of Jafar, it's only going to be in rotation for 15 months. Arcasia's Island only for 18. I think Reign of Jafar is like inherently a more hype set than the previous 3 that we've had. And maybe if we knew that rotation was kicking in, like people would have, bought less packs. So I think from a business standpoint, I can understand why they've only announced it now. I think that any later than now would have been too late, but I think announcing it now is just about fine. I don't have too many issues with it. Would I have preferred if they announced it earlier? Yeah, I think I probably would have, just from a consumer point of view, but I also probably don't mind as much as I thought. I think it's a fine time to announce it. So overall, there's going to be 2 formats. I'm actually really excited for it. I think that I trust Ravensburger to do a good job with it. Fable, though, as a reprint set, let's talk about that. I don't know about that, like there's a part of me that is excited now that there's all these chase cards to go for. And it's kind of... it's like I mentioned, I think it's well planned by Ravensburger to introduce these new rarities at the same time that you've got a reprint set, because suddenly a set which would be significantly less popular with players that have been opening packs since set 1 is suddenly going to be a lot more engaging to open. So I think that's really, really good from Ravensburger. I think the new rarities are a really good decision, to be honest. There's quite a lot of interesting things. So yeah, you've got these new rarities. Iconic, I would imagine it's going to be like 1 in 500. We don't know exactly. It might be even rarer. It could even be like 1 in 1,000 packs. It's going to be somewhere between that sort of range, like 400 to 1,000 packs that you can expect to get one of these iconics. Of course, you might get it in 1, you might get it in 10,000, but I'm sure you'll get it eventually. Mathematically, that would be the case. But these are going to be really, really big chase cards. They have very interesting foil effects, it seems. There is 2 iconic cards in the first set, which is Mickey and Minnie, and I personally think it's really nice actually to have even rarer cards than Enchanted. But importantly, the epic cards are somewhere between Legendary and somewhere between Enchanted. So I would imagine it's going to be 1 in 24, which is 1 in a box. You've got the Enchanted, which we think are around 1 in 96, which is 1 in a case, which is 4 boxes. So I think it's fair to assume that the epics are going to be more like 1 in 24, maybe 1 in 20, maybe even like 2 in 24. It's quite possible. And those are more like, they're basically some fancy foil effects of pre-existing cards that we saw in Elsa from set 1, which is also going to be a reprint. I think it's nice to have a better pack opening experience. Like, nobody really watches, I mean, I know people do, but pack opening videos for Disney Lorcana, when I moved into physical trading card games, I was like, oh my god, people are going to love pack openings. I can just farm pack openings. I can do shorts for pack openings. I can do this and I can do that. The reality is I spent like £1,000 on one pack opening and hardly anybody really cared, because the pack opening experience as both a person and as a spectator is just not that engaging, because it's like you're just opening packs until you hit the enchanted, right? And it's going to eventually happen, and that kind of takes away the magic of hitting it, because you know it's eventually going to come if you just keep opening. Whereas like with the super rare, the iconic and the epics, I think it's just going to make things a lot more interesting, right? There's a lot more things to get excited about, and I think it's a really good direction. And I do think it's important to have it with this reprint set. Reign of Jafar is out soon. There's also the new co-op mode, which honestly looks great. It got repackaged. I think that's really, really exciting. There's also this new collection starter set where you get a giant Tink promo foil, which is really, really cool. I can tell you as well with the reprints, so we know that Tinkerbell's getting reprinted. You might be wondering, well, what happens to the Enchanted Tink? I can confirm, based off the press conference I was privy to, that Enchanted cards won't be reprinted, right? Like, there's not going to be a reprint of Enchanted Tink. But your cards that are reprinted, so your Tinkerbell from set 1, you can still play that in the constructed format, because it's the same artwork. You can play the set 9. It is set 9, right? You can play the set 9. Yeah, Fable is set 9. You can play the set 9 Tink, or you can play the set 1 Tink, or you can play the Enchanted Tink, or you can play the Tinkerbell Giant Fairy Glimmer 4 Tink here. You get like a binder with the Mickey Mouse Brave Little Tailor from the World Championships and the challenge events, and you get 4 packs and a collector's guide. Really, really cool product. I'm a big fan of it. Obviously, Tink's a great card, and I think it's good that she's still in the format, and she will be in the format for at least another 8 sets with this reprint, which is pretty cool. But that's not all. There's also going to be a whole new world promo card. Big congratulations again to all the broadcasters. I did a whole video on that. We don't need to talk more about that. Let's be honest. I've done enough of that. But yeah, there's going to be a way of getting a whole new world promo card. I would imagine there's going to be like an enchanted version for participants, and some sort of like Twitch drops non-foil. Yeah, there you go, non-foil whole new world. And that also means this is going to be a reprint, right? I believe this means therefore that this will be a card which is available in the new format. Having said that, if you actually look at the cards, it still says set 1, I believe. So maybe not on a whole new world. Like, my gut feeling with the whole new world, if they're doing it as a promo for Worlds, is that it will also be reprinted. I mean, I think a whole new world has to be a top contender for a reprint card anyway. Like, it's a very iconic card. I would be surprised if it's not reprinted. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, make sure to check out the World stream on Twitch to get your hands on it. There'll be more information. And that's like the other question then. It's like, what happens with set 13 when more reprints happen? My prediction would be that what happens maybe around set 13 is we get some sort of infinity set or like some core set where, and maybe even later down the line, I don't know, but my prediction would be at some point we get a set which is like cards which are always going to be in the format and will never be rotated out. Cards like a whole new world, which are just so crucial to a bunch of different decks. I'm trying to think of some other examples. Maybe like Friends on the Other Side. These kinds of cards. Be Prepared. You know, you'd be surprised if Be Prepared isn't reprinted and Fabled. But maybe even like set 17, right? When the Fabled cards are rotating out, maybe that's when they'll do another reprint set, like one every 8 sets, like once every 2 years. Maybe at that point we get like another reprint set, and it's more like a it's like a core set of like these cards will never be rotated out, that sort of thing. I would imagine that's probably what happens. But that is everything about rotation and the new rarities. Give the video a like if you enjoyed it. There is going to be a ton of card reviews coming out in the near future as card reveals have started to drop. Hope you enjoyed the video. And yeah, thanks so much for watching, and see you on the next one. Thanks again to Card Market for sponsoring the stream. If you guys are looking to pick up singles online in Europe, Card Market's the place to do, and it's definitely an interesting place to check out how the markets have reacted to all of this news. See ya!